Fight fans, welcome to the PBC podcast, brought to you by Premier Boxing Champions with your host, Kenneth Bouhairie and Michael Rosenthal.
Welcome to the PBC podcast. I'm Kenneth Bouhairie.
And I'm Michael Rosenthal, editor of USA Today's Boxing Junkie.
And speaking of Boxing Junkie, we got your fix because the sport is back in a big way this week. World Championship Boxing Saturday night on SHOWTIME. And we'll have the undefeated challenger, Stephen Fulton Jr. joining us. Plus, we'll break down the entire PBC card. And in today's toe-to-toe segment, we're going to share our personal top 5 heavyweights post the Muhammad Ali era. Lots of names to choose from there, so we can't wait to sink our teeth into that. But let's get right into the show and right into the PBC fight of the week. This Saturday, January 23rd, PBC on SHOWTIME returns with the mean triple header beginning at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. In the main event, WBO World Super Bantamweight Champion Angelo Leo takes on the undefeated Stephen Fulton Jr. This is one hell of a fight. So before we begin to analyze it, let's take a look at the essentials.
Okay, here we go. Angelo Leo, 20-0, 9 knockouts. Fulton, 18-0, 8 knockouts. Nice to have 2 undefeated guys against each other. Obviously, they're both 5-0 in their last 5. Leo has 1 knockout in those 5 fights. Fulton has 2. Leo, in his last fight, outpointed Tremaine Williams on August 1st to win the title. Fulton last fought on January 25th. He outpointed Arnold Kagai. Leo, 45% knockout ratio. Fulton, 44. You're going to find a lot of similarities going down here.
Yeah.
Leo, 111 professional rounds. Fulton, 107. They're both 26. Leo turned pro in 2012, Fulton 2014. Both fight from an orthodox stance. Leo's 5'6", Fulton 5'6.5". Leo 69-inch reach, 70.5 for Fulton. Leo is from Albuquerque but fights out of Vegas now. Fulton is from Philadelphia.
Oh, yeah, you can see, so many similarities. It's as close to a 50-50 fight as you're going to get. These guys were supposed to duel last August, but Fulton pulled out when he contracted the COVID-19. Leo would go on to win the vacant titles, an extremely impressive victory, I thought, over Tremaine Williams. Mike, did that victory, Leo's win over Williams, did it change your perception of the bout versus Fulton?
Not too much, but I might give Leo a better chance than I would have beforehand. I thought he looked, as you just said, I thought he looked terrific against Williams with his pressure. That body attack was just crazy. I think it's clearer than ever to me. Well, it's clearer than ever to me that this is a very, very good fighter. He reminds me a lot of Leo Santa Cruz. I still think he could have problems with Fulton's boxing ability, though, but we'll get into that.
Yeah, I was extremely impressed by his performance, skill, the stamina, and not just that he applied pressure, but it was intelligent pressure, calculated aggression, designed to win rounds and wear your opponent down and break his will. But let's talk about Fulton. He's the favorite going into Saturday night. However, he did contract COVID-19 and he has had a long layoff. Do you think either of those things might affect him?
Well, obviously, we won't know for sure until the fight. Maybe not even then. I'll say this: I've seen enough fighters who have bounced back from the coronavirus and looked strong. We're all kind of becoming experts in how this impacts fighters during this pandemic. And he's had 5 months to recover. So I expect Fulton to be at 100%, but we just don't know. Individuals are individuals too. You don't know how people are going to react once they get into the ring and start fighting.
Yeah, for sure. And with respect to the rust, I could see perhaps rust being a factor. But look, he's only 26. He's put the work in the gym. I think he'll be ready either way. Style-wise, though, how does this fight play out?
Well, this is a classic matchup of a pressure fighter versus a boxer. Leo will be attacking, and Fulton will be, trying to catch Leo coming in, using his jab, moving. This is the whole fight. Can Leo's pressure get Fulton off his game plan? I think both fighters are going to have some success, but something has to give in order for us to get a winner in the fight.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing about Fulton, though, I do think that he can fight a bit in the trenches as well. I don't know if he's as good as Leo is fighting on the inside, fighting that kind of fight. But he may just have to do that in spurts during the matchup. All right, it's time for us to make our predictions. Mike, who do you got?
Man, this is a tough one. I really think this is a pick'em fight. Leo has the perfect style for a slick boxer like Fulton. Pressure, body punching. That's how you slow a guy down. Floyd Mayweather. I keep thinking of Floyd Mayweather and Marcos Maidana. Maidana just kept coming, and Mayweather had some problems, although he won two, clear decisions, in my opinion. Leo and Fulton obviously aren't those fighters, but you can get an idea of what you might see. I think in the end, skills trump pressure. I think Fulton will have some problems with Leo, but doing the things that I mentioned, coming in, catching him coming in, moving, and as you mentioned, he's going to have to fight inside. And I think he could do that on occasion. I think he's going to outpoint Leo in the end. Fulton by a close but unanimous decision.
That's the general consensus. Fulton will outbox him, win a decision. That's why he's the favorite. But I'm going with the upset here. I like Angelo Leo. I expect the close decision, but I think he's going to apply steady pressure, take control of the fight, midway, and perhaps even dominate down the stretch in a bout where a rematch is called for. I am concerned about the Leo for Fulton, and I wonder if the pandemic has hampered his training in any way. Leo, of course, trains out of the Mayweather Boxing Club in Las Vegas, and they keep a steady stream of guys to work with there. I just think he's going to pull it out, man.
Good point, actually, about the training. It's probably been more stable, a little bit more. Obviously, if you factor in the COVID-19, it's definitely been more stable for Angelo Leo. But again, for me, I usually lean toward the guy I think is more talented.
Yeah.
And I think Fulton's just a little bit more talented. But listen, this is a great matchup.
Yeah, well, if my prediction comes true, I'm probably picking Fulton in the rematch. I just wonder if he's going to be completely 100% and as ready as he can be for this fight. But we shall see what happens. Now, in the co-main, another 50-50 fight that I've been going back and forth on, a battle of undefeated 122-pounders, Aleem versus Victor Pasillas for the interim WBA World Super Bantamweight title. Mike, why are so many calling this fight the sleeper on the card?
Well, you have two unbeaten, talented, hungry young guys fighting for their place among the elites in their division. It's almost like they shouldn't even be fighting each other yet, but here we are. It's a great matchup. Yeah. It's just really fascinating in a matchup, and we'll get into it.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I mean, we saw Aleem last August. He stopped Marcus Bates in 10. How did he look to you, and what are your thoughts on Aleem as a fighter?
Well, I haven't seen too much of him. There isn't too much on YouTube. But he seems to be, to me, what I've seen, it seems to be a complete boxer puncher, a guy with good technique, but also one who likes to fight. And he isn't afraid to mix it up. I mean, he turned up the heat a few times, and in the fights that I saw, I was like, whoa, this guy really goes after it when he wants to. And while his record suggests he might not have that much power, he's stopped his last 6 opponents. That tells me he's getting more and more powerful as he goes along. I think he's a championship level guy.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I mean, he looked great against Marcus Bates. The hand speed, the power, quickness, the defense, you name it. But what about Victor Pasillas? I mean, the guy has quite a story. For the folks who don't know him, don't sleep. How good is he?
Well, you mentioned his story. He returned in 2018 after 2.5 years away from the sport. He stopped all of his 5 opponents since his return. He seems to be fit, focused, hungry, all the things you have to be to succeed now. He reportedly had something like 300 amateur fights, which means he has a great fundamental foundation. I think that, combined with his natural gifts and the fire that I see under him right now, I think he could end up being somebody special.
Yeah, it seems like he's starting to put it together now. He has all the tools. He's got that amateur background, and he's crafty. He's 28 years old. He's still youthful, but that veteran mindset and style. Real tough fight to call here, but we got to do it. Mike, what's your pick?
Well, I really hate to make a pick in this fight, which again I think is essentially a 50-50 fight. I see these two, as I said, really talented young guys who are on the way up. Win or lose, I think they're on the way up. I just have so much respect for both of them. I guess I'm just going to go with my gut on this. It seems to me there's something special about Pasillas, the ability, the confidence. There's just something about him that that makes me feel like he's going to really have a lot of success. So I lean a little bit toward him. So I'm going to pick him to win a close decision. But here's another prediction: both of these guys are going to win at least one world title at some point.
Yeah, I really, really struggled with this one. I think it's a tough matchup to call, and I hate the fact that I'm picking Aleem because one of us might start 0-2
Yeah.
to begin the new year. But I like Aleem here to win a decision. But truly, this one could go either way. I could easily see Pasillas catching Aleem at some point with a hard shot and pulling off the stoppage, or even wearing Aleem down and stopping him that way. But I think if Aleem fights smart, uses speed and combinations to get in, get out, avoid exchanges, he should be able to do enough to win on points. Now, in the televised opener, we've got the return of sign up for KOs. Rolando Romero defending his interim WBA World Lightweight strap versus Justin Pauldo. Mike, a lot of people thought Jackson Marinez deserved the win over Romero when they fought last August. What were your thoughts on Romero following that fight?
Well, I was among those who thought Marinez should have gotten that decision. I had it 116-112, 8 rounds to 4 for Marinez. Romero was the aggressor, and he landed some eye-catching shots, which evidently impressed the judges. But I just thought Marinez outboxed and outworked him. I think the latter is the most important thing, that he outworked him. So my thoughts on Romero: maybe he learned that you can't rely solely on your power. You gotta be busy. You gotta throw punches. You gotta box sometimes. I'm guessing that the controversy will have lit a fire under him. I think he's going to want to prove that he's better than he looked in that fight. And I think he probably is better than he looked in that fight. So I expect more from him in this fight.
His opponent, Justin Pauldo, real good boxer, trained out of Texas by Ronnie Shields, but the underdog coming into this fight. Can he pull off the upset?
Yes, I think that's possible. Pauldo is also a slick guy, which means there's a chance that he could do what Marinez did against Romero. And Pauldo is more than just a sticker and a mover. He's not afraid to fight at times either. I liked what I saw when I did some research on him. He's a good fighter. And I think he's a genuine threat to Romero. Romero had better be at the top of his game, or he could have more problems in this fight.
Do you think he will? What's your prediction?
Well, I actually this one, your gut tells you to go with Romero because he's the guy, he's the prospect, right? But I think it's a tough call. I'm guessing that Romero will look better than he did against Marinez. Fights like that sometimes wake up fighters. At the same time, though, I think Pauldo is a good fighter. He has the tools to give Romero problems. Maybe it comes down to whether Pauldo can take Romero's power. Sometimes good boxers go back on their heels when they take heavy shots. I'm not sure that's what's going to happen in this fight, but I think that's a possibility. I think it's possible Romero's power will end up causing Pauldo problems. So I'm going to say that Romero's going to win, and he's going to win by a late stoppage.
Yeah, I like Romero to bounce back and make a statement here because, quite frankly, he has to. Pauldo's a little similar to Marinez in that he likes to box and move more, but as you said, he can't stand his ground and fight. Look, either Romero has learned from that last fight or not. I believe the young man wants to be great, that he's made the corrections in camp, and he's going to come out firing on Saturday night. I like him to stop Pauldo in 6 rounds. All right, it's time. I'm sorry?
Quick one. Okay.
Well, let's see. That's my prediction. It's time to bring in this week's guest. He returns to the ring Saturday night on Showtime to challenge WBO World Super Bantamweight Champion Angelo Leo. Let's welcome one of Philadelphia's finest, the undefeated Stephen Fulton Jr. All right, Stephen, big fight on Saturday night versus the champion Angelo Leo. How has training camp been for you?
Training camp's been great. It's better than the last one leading up to the last fight.
What would you say made it better?
Losing out on the opportunity and just going through life changes and pushing myself harder than I did before.
I get what you're saying. You and Leo were supposed to fight last August for the world title. You pulled out when you tested positive for COVID-19. Did you suffer any serious symptoms from COVID?
Yes.
What kind of
loss of breathing was hard.
Yeah.
I had back pain. I had I actually was bleeding out of my nose one time I went running.
At what point were you, or did you feel you were 100% healthy again?
After a month.
Tell us from an emotional standpoint, how difficult was that, being so close to realizing, a dream you've had since you were a kid, only to have it fall through at the last second?
It was very tough. It was very emotional for me, and for the most part, it was just like depressing. But I got over it. I just faced it and got over it.
Yeah, we actually had a chance to talk before, a few days ago, and you told me that you sort of turned it into a positive. You sort of, went through what you went through, and you said, well, this is God's plan, and I'm going to turn this into a positive. Is that accurate? Maybe you could describe that.
For sure. I looked at it from a good point of view, and maybe if I'd have had that shot, I wouldn't have been as much as in shape and made the changes in my camp that really needed to be made. Maybe it was God giving him his world title, and now it's my turn.
What kind of changes did you make?
Training. So I switched my trainers up.
Okay. Who's your new trainer, if you don't mind us asking?
Raheem is my lead.
Is he someone you knew from before, or what made you make the change?
He was always in my corner, but he just makes the perfect decisions. He was a fighter before, so he knows a lot more. He took care of a lot of things that a trainer should take care of. That he needed to. I feel as though that position fitted him best, and he knows how to come up with great game plans. He helped me with my conditioning. He actually sparred me this camp when we didn't have no one to spar due to like the COVID things and getting people tested. So it's a lot I can keep going on about.
Now you kind of mentioned this being a blessing in disguise. You had a chance to watch Angelo Leo when he won the title against Tremaine Williams. What did you think of his performance?
I think it was a performance we all expected for him to just be the aggressive and come forward and try to be the dog. I think we all expected that.
You mentioned he's an aggressor. He's like a pressure fighter. Do you like it? Do you prefer it when a guy comes directly at you?
Yes.
Now, it's funny because apparently Floyd Mayweather told Angelo Leo that he should fight you the way Marcos Maidana fought. What was your reaction when you heard that?
Yeah, it was like they could try. A lot of fighters that I fought tried that, and it didn't work. So it's like I feel like this will be an easy fight for me.
Wow.
Okay. Switching topics, you grew up in a pretty rough neighborhood in Philadelphia. Can you tell us what that was like, both the good, the bad, and anything else?
It has its ups and its downs. It was rough, but at times I got over it and kind of like felt like you wanted to be it was kind of forced into the street life, but I kind of got away from it. So it was like, yeah, it has its ups and its downs.
I understand that your dad was incarcerated for much of your childhood. How difficult was that on you?
It was difficult. I mean, of course, I need every man should have their father with them. So it was very difficult. Me growing up with just women around.
Now, how about boxing? How did you find the sport, and when did you find the sport?
When my father came home from prison, he met up with my older trainer, and we all linked up and was talking, and then the conversation of boxing came about and what they were doing. And my dad looked at me and asked me, did I want to box? And I said, yeah, I don't care.
How old were you at that time?
I was about 12.
Okay. Did you fall in love with the sport immediately, or did it sort of take you a while to warm up to it?
No, I'm competitive. So once I seen the other guys that were boxing, I just knew like, all right, this is something I'm gonna do.
When did you realize, hey, I'm good at this?
Once I honestly went to the ringside and I won the tournament.
Wow.
And after that, it was like, I'm real good. I'm good. I can do this.
So that was shortly
And
after
I won
you
the national
started?
silver glove
There you
right
go.
after it.
Wow.
Right after I won the national silver glove.
Where did your nickname Cool Boy come from?
I gave it to myself.
What's the story behind it? I mean, it's just
Me hanging around my friends, and one of them name was Todd the Cool Guy, and all we did was like get dressed and stay fly and talk to girls and those type of things, and that's just how I carry myself.
Cool. What do you think you would be doing if you weren't a boxer? Have you ever thought about that?
Street activities if it wasn't a 9 to 5.
Well, you can see how boxing obviously helped you. You mentioned starting at 12 years old. Were there any other fighters growing up that you looked up to, like guys you used to watch on TV or study that maybe motivated you?
After a while, I've been motivated by like Muhammad Ali and them because that's when I started to learn the sport and the things in that such matter. But growing up regularly without boxing, no, it was no one that I kind of looked up to.
So was that just you developed your own style? Because the way you fight, it's like you're a student of the game. Did that just come natural to you, or?
I believe it comes natural.
Wow. Now, what about today? What current fighters do you enjoy watching in boxing?
I like Earl Spence.
Would you say he's your favorite boxer?
I like Tank.
Okay.
I like the Charlos. They're good as well.
Okay.
Who else do I like? I like Crawford.
Do you consider yourself a fan of boxing?
Now I am.
Now, in your own division, I mean, the 122-pound division is sizzling right now. There's talk that Luis Nery may fight Brandon Figueroa. What do you think of that fight? Who do you think wins that fight?
I would say Luis Nery will win if he's more sharper and know how to control the pace and the momentum and the distance of the fight. But then I would say Brandon if you make it a dog fight, and I believe once I get past this, I will have the winners of them.
Do you have a preference between those two guys, or it just doesn't matter? Whoever wins is fine with you.
Whoever wins.
Okay, cool. I know you can't look beyond Saturday night, which you kind of just did actually. But is there one matchup that you really want? Big matchup that you really want, something that you covet?
A unification bout.
Okay, so it's all about unification.
Yeah, it wouldn't matter who.
Okay. Getting back to Saturday night, final question. Tell us why you think you're going to win the fight.
I know I'm gonna win the fight because I'm the better man. I want it more. I'm the better fighter overall. I'm smarter in the ring. I fought better opposition. So this fight with him will just it should be normal to me.
Right. You told me something earlier that I liked. You said it's also a better story now. Can you explain that?
Yes, it is a better story because I lost. I had the shot, lost it due to COVID, and now I'm getting the shot back, and I will be defeating the champion.
So I guess it was tough at the time, but I get looking back, maybe having to wait 5 months really isn't the biggest deal in the world, or is it?
Nope.
As long as you have your hand raised, right?
Yep.
All right, very good.
Matters.
All right, Stephen, thanks so much for taking the time. We know you're training. Best of luck.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
All right, it's time for Mike and I to go toe-to-toe, blow for blow. And this week, we're going to share our top 5 heavyweights post-Muhammad Ali. That's beyond Ali's heavyweight reign. Lots of good heavyweights during that time, but we've got to pick 5. So, Mike, the floor is yours. We'll start with your number 5. Who do you got?
Okay. You know what? I want to preface this with 2 things real quick. I think you nailed something when we talked about this off the podcast, that none of these guys had a lot of fights against, really, really top level heavyweights. Mm-hmm. It's just the eras that they're from. The Ali, Frazier, Foreman era, that era is just the golden era of heavyweights is just one of a kind. I don't think it ever happened before, and I'm not sure it's ever going to happen again. And then the second thing is I have my 5, but I wanted at the very end, I just want to add not a 6th, but I want to mention one more guy and explain why he's not my top 5.
At the end?
At the end. All right. Yeah. All right. You know what? Since he's in a way he's number six, I could do it now and then I'll do my number 5. So my number six, if you will, or my added guy is Tyson Fury.
Okay.
Now I want to say that Fury will probably almost assuredly be in my top 5 when he's finished. I think he's as talented as any of the guys that we're going to mention, or close to as talented anyway. And he has 2 victories that arguably are as good as any among these guys. You know, his dominating points victory over Vladimir Klitschko and then his knockout victory over Deontay Wilder. Those were solid victories. I'm leaving him off the list for now because he's not finished. And we don't know what might happen. For example, he might get knocked out by Anthony Joshua twice. And I think the way he's perceived to be changed completely, right? But as things stands now, I think I have tremendous respect for him. And he's clearly the best best active heavyweight, in my opinion.
Yeah, as it stands right now, he's number 1, although it's, he's got a shaky grip on that. Anything can happen between the top 3 heavyweights, or 4 if you want to add Andy Ruiz and so forth. I mean, so much can change. So much has changed in the past 3 years. But anyway, let's rock out. Let's get with your number 5.
Okay, after all that, my number 5, drum roll, Vladimir Klitschko.
Okay.
So Vlad didn't have strong opposition, as we've mentioned, but he was just so dominating for so long that there's just no way you could deny him a place here. I think the fact that he overcame some early problems, those weird knockout losses, to be specific, to reign as champion for most of a 15-year period, I think is remarkable. He reigned for 12 years when you combine his different reigns, which is a division record. That's more than Joe Louis. He won 20, if I read it correctly, he won 25 title fights, heavyweight title fights, which is just nuts. Now, like Lennox Lewis, his jab and his straight right are among the best I've ever seen live or on video. Tremendous jab, tremendous right hand. And I mentioned Lewis already. It probably wasn't a coincidence that they were both trained by Emmanuel Stewart. I think he played a role in that. And Vlad's consistency over a long period was just mind-boggling. So put all that together, and he's one of the best, certainly since Ali went away.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you, and that's why he's my number 5 as well. You mentioned the 2 world title reigns. I mean, he ruled for so long, bounced back from his early losses, adjusted, turned the corner in that Samuel Peter fight in 2005 where he was dropped 3 times but absolutely ruined a dangerous Peter in the process, and never looked back. I mean, one of the most consistent heavyweight champions ever, and could probably still beat a handful of guys if he came out of
for sure.
Retirement today. Perhaps underappreciated, maybe not the most exciting style, but one of the most consistent heavyweight champions we've ever seen. Let's go on to number 4. I'll kick this one off, and my number 4 is Iron Mike Tyson. What more can we say about Iron Mike? Youngest fighter ever to win the World Heavyweight Championship, 20 years old. He became undisputed champion faster than you can blink, made 10 successful defenses of his heavyweight strap, returned in 1995, became a 2-time heavyweight champion, an icon, legendary power knockouts. I mean, the life this guy has lived. I've always said that if they ever updated the Bible, Mike Tyson would probably be in it. I mean, but anyway, as far as heavyweight accomplishments, number 4 post Ali.
Well, Tyson was really good, especially in the first run as heavyweight champion. And then he was good enough to go to prison for however long he went, come back, and then win it again, which is quite a thing. The criticism that I've always had about Tyson, it's not necessarily an original thing, but he never beat well, the word that people usually use is great. He never beat a great opponent when at the time that opponent was still great.
Yeah.
He did beat Larry Holmes, who you could argue was great, but Holmes was already getting on in years. I think he was 38. He failed twice against Evander Holyfield. And so anyway, he just never got over the hump, in my opinion, in that regard. So he beat a lot of second level guys, and then he came up short in his biggest fight. So great in the first part of his career, good in the second part of his career, but never beat that top guy.
Yeah, never got over that hump. Who's your number 4?
My number 4 is one of the guys I just mentioned, Evander Holyfield.
Wow.
Yeah. Pound for pound, he's the best of the lot, and it's not even close, in my opinion. Pound for pound, it's a runaway win for him. I've always said that if he were a natural heavyweight, if he were 6'3.5", 235 pounds, he'd have been the greatest heavyweight of all time. As it was, he had 4 reigns as champion over a period of 11 years, with victories over Douglas, Holmes, Foreman, Bowe, Moore, Mercer, 2 over Mike Tyson. And he nearly won the title a 5th time at 46 years old, but was on the wrong end of a disputed decision against Nikolai Valuev, the giant Russian. And one of the greatest fighters of my lifetime, and I think also a great heavyweight.
Yeah, I absolutely, without question. I'll have more on Commander Vander in a little bit. Let's go to number 3. Who do you have?
And number 3 is maybe my unusual pick, but I actually feel kind of strongly about it. Vitaly Klitschko. I always thought, first of all, I've always thought he was the better of the Klitschko brothers. He wasn't as quick or as athletic as Vladimir, but he was more of a fighter in my eyes, a tougher, more durable guy. In other words, I think he would have kicked Vladimir's ass in a street fight without question. Remember, he gave Lennox Lewis all he could handle before he lost that fight on a cut. Lewis never fought again, so maybe he wasn't at his best. But that's the best opponent that either guy faced, unless you talk about Klitschko's the last couple fights in Klitschko's career, Vladimir's career. And Vitaly blew out his shoulder against Chris Bird. Otherwise, I think he would have won that fight. So those are his only 2 losses. He dominated everybody else with 41 knockouts in his 45 victories. He had 3 reigns as champion, the last one for 5 years after a long layoff because of injury. So he came back after, I don't know, I think he was gone like 4 years or something like that, and came back, won the title, and served and reigned for like another 5 years. I think Vitaly Klitschko was a great heavyweight, and I think he was really underappreciated.
I think he was a very good heavyweight. I think he was overappreciated. You mentioned he could probably beat up Vladimir Klitschko in a street fight. Yeah, well, Mike Tyson probably could too, but I didn't see him on your list anywhere. Here's my thing with Vitaly Klitschko is the opposition. It makes Tyson's opposition look like, like Floyd Mayweather's. I mean, his opposition was just really bad.
It's the same as Vladimir.
Except he fought them all after Vladimir. It's like Vladimir would beat him up, and then he would go and scrape up the leftovers. So, I mean, you just go down the list. All those guys he fought after Vladimir, Sam Peter and Corey Sanders, and I mean, he fought Shannon Briggs. Goodness gracious, Thomas Adamick and Olander Solis was basically a cruiserweight. I mean, not too many impressive wins in there. Juan Carlos Gomez was another cruiserweight, pretty much. I mean, Danny Williams, sheesh.
He had the same resume as his brother.
I think his brother had a better resume.
Unless you count the last 2 fights in his career, but he lost both those fights, Vladimir.
Yeah, I think Vladimir had a better resume. First of all, he fought all those guys beforehand, and to me, more important than who is when. I mean, Roberto Duran has a win over William Joppy. William Joppy has a win over Roberto Duran. Is it as impressive as Tommy Hearns' win over Roberto Duran? Not exactly. So I think that Vladimir softens you up, pounds you away, stops you in one-sided dominant fashion, and then 2 years later, 3 years later, Vitaly will come along and beat that same fighter. I just don't. Not all wins are created equal. That said, and I weigh resume heavily, but if you're talking about the eyeball test, yeah, Vitaly Klitschko is a nightmare. I mean, he could box. He had power. He was tough. He could take a bomb, if needed. I mean, he had all the tools. He could have been, I feel like if he didn't step away and if he had, stayed on his game, man, he could have been champ for a long, long time. And we'd be talking about a completely different list.
What about the 3 knockout losses by Vladimir? You can't just ignore those.
Well, I think he avenged them, no? I mean, except for the Corey Sanders. Yeah. I mean, it still happens. It still happened, but You think about it, he lost twice, and then he came back, and then he had a dominant reign. I think he improved after those knockout losses.
No question about that.
And he truly he had a dominant reign after that. He became a better fighter, a more patient fighter, a smarter fighter. Still had the power. Still pretty much stopped everyone he faced. I mean, it wasn't pretty until the stoppage. But I just feel like those are things that he learned from and he bounced back from. So, a lot of fighters have losses earlier in their careers. They weren't necessarily early in his career. I mean, he was in his 20s, but heavyweights mature later, and he's an example of that. That's sort of how I looked at it.
You just gave me a story idea. I'm gonna interview. I don't know how many guys fought both guys, but I'm gonna try to get a hold of some guys and just ask them the question point blank: who was better?
Yeah, it's a good debate. I mean, but anyway, let me get to my number 3, who you mentioned before, the real deal, Evander Holyfield, came up from cruiser, became one of the greatest heavyweights ever. You got the big KO of Buster Douglas, obviously, the incredible trilogy against Riddick Bowe. The unbelievable upset over Mike Tyson, November 9th, 1996. I will never forget that night. One of the most incredible in boxing history, to me, cementing him as a legend. And, of course, the 4 forgettable fights with John Ruiz. But, we're not going to go too deep into that. That's neither here nor there. Either way, Evander Holyfield places number 3 on my list.
Well, I could basically said what I wanted to say earlier, but Evander's one of my favorite fighters of my definitely of my career, but also my life. It would have been interesting to see if he were bigger, how he might have done, but obviously we'll never know that. But even the Ruiz fights, Ruiz was number one. He was a multi-time title holder, and he was a kind of a crafty guy. He's the kind of guy who, like, he was horrible to watch, but he found ways to win fights, that kind of thing. So he was a pretty good heavyweight. So
he was a solid heavyweight.
Yeah, I'll even give him Evander credit for those.
Yeah. He was a solid heavyweight. That knockout win over Kirk Johnson, I thought, was very, very impressive. And of course, those 4 fights. I think the losses to David Tua and Roy Jones sort of overshadow the kind of fighter that John Ruiz was. All right, let's get to number 2. I believe it is my turn. And my number 2 could easily be number 1. I'm going with Lennox Lewis, who I believe at his best could beat any heavyweight from any time. He could move, could box. He had a great jab, threw wonderful combinations, dynamite in both fists. Was pretty big for the heavyweight division during his time. His combination of size, skill, and power, just unmatched as far as I'm concerned, was sort of overlooked and avoided for a long time. But he has big wins up and down his resume. Of course, the 2 fights with Holyfield, both of which he won. Scores be damned.
Right.
The huge upset over Razor Ruddock. He destroyed contender after contender. I mean, knockouts over Michael Grant and Andrew Galata and on and on. TKO win over Vitaly Klitschko in his final fight. I go as far to say Lennox Lewis, as great as he is considered right now, is still somewhat underrated, but he's number 2 on my list here.
It's my number 2, Lennox Lewis.
All right.
Right. So first of all, he beat every man he ever fought, including rematches with the 2 guys who stopped him. Those are his only 2 losses. He might have been the most complete heavyweight of this bunch when you combine the things that you mentioned, his boxing ability, his power, and his size. He was just a complete heavyweight, complete fighter.
Yes.
He had it all. Like I said about Vladimir, his jab and his straight right, I think, are among the best in the history of the sport. But he was a complete package. I guess you can say that he had a questionable chin, but I think he just got careless in those fights. And heavyweights just punch really hard. I mean,
exactly.
That's just how it is. And he was just so consistent. He was heavyweight champ for most of 1992 to 2004. So for more than a decade, he was like the top guy. And he retired in 2000. He retired as champion in 2004. I love this guy as a fighter, and I love the guy as a person, by the way. He's such a great guy.
Yeah, he truly is. And, with respect to the chin thing, look, he took big shots from Ray Mercer, Vitaly Klitschko, big shots from even Holyfield.
That's true.
I mean, his chin was definitely Shannon Briggs, who's a pretty big puncher. His chin was definitely tested other times. But as you said, look, with heavyweights, you just never know. You get caught slipping, one shot can drop you. I guess we have the same number 1.
Yeah, I was gonna say that
as well. Who's your guy?
So number one is Larry Holmes. Holmes was a sparring partner, an heir apparent to Muhammad Ali, and he ultimately, in my opinion, lived up to that billing. He had arguably the greatest jab of all time, of any weight, certainly up there with anybody. And that set up everything else that he did. He was quick and athletic, especially for his size. Durable guy. He could take a punch. Only a prime Mike Tyson was able to stop him, and he was already getting on in years when that happened. He didn't beat a lot of. One thing that I've learned after discussing it with people who really know a lot about history of the boxing, I sort of learned that he didn't have the greatest resume either necessarily. Right. He didn't beat a lot of real big name guys. He beat Ken Norton to win the title. And for those who haven't seen that fight is an absolute epic fight. He won it by a split decision. Go back on YouTube and watch that fight because it's incredible. He beat Ernie Shavers twice. The Jerry Cooney fight was a huge fight, first of all, and it was also, I think, a big win. He outpointed Tim Witherspoon, who was a really good fighter. But let's put it this way. We saw enough against good opposition to know how great this guy was. And remember, he was still competitive in his late 40s and even into his early 50s, I think, which is an indication of his skill set.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember he fought Evander Holyfield, was it, in his early 40s or something like that, and gave Holyfield some problems. Yeah, and in fact, I remember his prediction in one of the magazines regarding Holyfield versus Tyson in 1996. He said Holyfield's going to take that guy into deep waters and drown him, and he was so on point. And plus, he beat Butterbean by 10 unanimous decision. But he had some other wins as well. I don't remember if it was Oliver McCall that he fought, or
he beat McCall. Yeah.
I mean, just incredible wins at an advanced age, which just shows you how great he was. I mean, he defended his title in his prime, an insane 19 times. 48-0 at one point. I think, a truly special fighter who was never fully appreciated and probably still isn't.
Came at the wrong time.
Came at the wrong time, and partly because of a rap verse by Tupac Shakur. Those who know what I'm talking about. But in any case, without doubt, I think one of the 5 greatest heavyweights of all time, you could argue, and certainly number one post Muhammad Ali. So I guess we didn't have too many differences in our list, or at least we both finished with the top 2.
Well, two things. One, I didn't have Tyson, so that'll be appalling to some people. Yeah, I consider Tyson. He's close to the top 5, obviously, but for the reason that I stated, I didn't include him. And the thing about Holmes is, like you said, he's top 5. Sometimes I think that, sometimes I don't, because of the resumes. I don't think he beat a lot of top guys. You look at Ali's resume; it's absolutely nuts.
It's unfair, yeah.
I mean, how many big name guys that he beat? Like even George Foreman, I think is better.
George Foreman, yes.
If you go back, even like Lennox Lewis's is better than the Klitschko's, because there were just more guys. There was a bigger pool of good fighters. Yeah. So things, maybe things are okay now. I mean, at least we have some guys who are good and interesting. So maybe we should try to enjoy the heavyweight division as it is.
We certainly should, because I think we've seen a revival, and hopefully we'll see all the fights. We've seen some of them, and maybe we get some more fights this year. We'll see what happens, but as goes the heavyweight division, so does boxing. So perhaps we witness a return to the glory era. Now, with that's going to do it for this week's episode. We want to thank Stephen Fulton for joining us. We're looking forward to seeing him challenge Angelo Leo for Leo's WBO World Super Bantamweight title. It's a battle of unbeaten rising stars. Don't forget that fight headlines a great triple header on Showtime Saturday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Be sure to like and subscribe to the PBC podcast wherever you find us, YouTube, iTunes, etc. And be sure to check us out next week for more boxing talk right here on the PBC podcast.